Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation History number 29. And we're going to be talking about Col.Sgt. Booth, VC, and the Battle of Intombi Drift. As always, I'm going to start us off with a tune.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wall. Your new gods sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for the sword, what's love that heed and folly? Bring all your hopes to God. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly proffered laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come thou to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with dear bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all of thankless years.
And that was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. If you like good music, do go and check his channel out on YouTube, please. Before we start, some people will have noticed that last night I put a post on X on Twitter about Lady of Shalott sadly passing away. The reason I did that was another friend of hers who's in my Discord actually confirmed that she did pass away last night. And so that's why I put that up. I mean, loads and loads of people have commented that it's had about 40,000 views. Nearly everyone who is anybody in our sphere had good words to say about Lady of Shalott. She was an excellent lady. I considered her my friend. And she will be sadly missed by everyone in our sphere. So, yeah. Don't know what else I can say about that. Anyway, I'm joined this evening by Aaron Hook. How are you going, Aaron?
I'm well, Jim.
And we're going to be talking about one of the lesser-known episodes of the Anglo-Zulu War in 1879, and that is the Battle of Intombi Drift, and in particular about Sergeant Anthony Booth, who won the Victoria Cross, quite rightly, for his actions and leadership during this battle. The first illustration you can see on the screen at the moment, and we've got several thanks to Aaron Hook, is actually a typical ox wagon of the sort that the British used to transport their supplies during the Anglo-Zulu War. And you can see they're quite cumbersome, they're quite large and heavy, and they don't move very quickly. To set up the battle, Intombi Drift is a drift on the Intombi River. A drift in South Africa is basically a ford. And it's between Derby and Lüneburg. And the 80th Regiment were operating around Lüneburg. That's the Staffordshire Volunteers. I think we've got a picture of their badge, haven't we, Aaron?
Yes,
Somewhere else.
there you go.
Yeah, there we go. That's the Staffordshire Volunteers, the 80th Foot. And you can see it's got the Staffordshire knot on the top. Anyway, yeah, the 80th Regiment were operating around Lüneburg, which is kind of northern Zululand. I've actually been to Intombi Drift quite a few times, and it is very isolated in the middle of nowhere, even today. When I first went there in the mid-1980s, I had two four-wheel drive minibuses with tourists, and we couldn't get them across the river because the river was flooded, much like it is in the time of the battle, and we had to actually walk across the river. And there's a little Zulu kraal on the far side, which is where the main lager was. And the little Imfanis there, the little Zulu toddlers, were just amazed to see white people. That's how in the middle of nowhere Intombi Drift is, even to this day. And one of our little combi minibuses got bogged, and we had to dig it out. So I've got some appreciation of how difficult it was for the British soldiers with a big ox wagon convoy and a flooded river.
Yeah.
The river came up in flood, which South African rivers are quite liable to do quite quickly. And it was pretty obvious that there were a lot of hostile Zulus in the area. In particular, there was Mibelini Marmaswati, who was actually a pretender to the Swazi throne, but was also a leader of a lot of irregular Zulu warriors. And he was in the area. And it was pretty obvious that there was a good chance of an attack taking place. Now, to let you understand, the Battle of Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift was the 22nd to the 23rd of January. And the Battle of Intombi, which we're talking about today, was the 12th of March. And it was, in fact, the second, without spoilers, it was the second British defeat of the Anglo-Zulu. It is the second British defeat of the Anglo-Zulu War. This is Mswati, this photograph. As far as I know, that's the only photograph of him. He's got a knob carry over his shoulder, which is a big club that Zulus use for braining people. And he's also got the head ring on his head, which shows that he's a married guy. And of course, he was a fairly important chief. Anyway, people, the 80th Regiment really wanted this convoy. It had hundreds of thousands of rounds of Martini Henry ammunition in it. It had lots of mealies, which is Indian corn, which was pretty staple food in the Anglo-Zulu War. And it also had other supplies, biscuits. I think there was even a couple of rocket troughs in it that were going to be supplied to the 80th Regiment. Actually, it was 90,000 rounds of ammunition, beg your pardon, and 225 pounds of gunpowder. So this was a convoy that the Zulus would very much like to get, especially because, of course, they'd captured something like 700 or 800 Martini Henry rifles during the Battle of Isandlwana. So 90,000 rounds of Martini ammunition would be extremely useful to them. Anyway, a British officer said to the original commander of the convoy that he was to waste no more time and get the convoy into Lüneburg. Unfortunately, the officer concerned misunderstood, just abandoned the wagons and just marched his men to Lüneburg without the supplies. When he turned up in Lüneburg, of course, the commanding British officer there was flabbergasted. I don't know if this guy was particularly bright or whatever you want to say about him, but anyway, the British officer in Lüneburg immediately sent out Captain Moriarty. There's a name for people who are Sherlock Holmes fans. He sent out Captain Moriarty with 106 men to go and bring the convoy in. Now, you've got to understand this is the rainy season in Zululand. It was raining pretty much every day. It was also hot at that time of year. These 106 guys, with a certain number of African four-loopers and a few Natal civilian wagon drivers, white guys, had to try and move all these wagons across the river. They gradually got some across, but you have to bear in mind the only way you could do this was you would have to put 2 or even 3 teams of oxen together to get one wagon very slowly across the river. And also the guys would have to go in and push and get thoroughly soaked themselves. So they were only able to get some of these across. They built a lager, but it was which is a wagon defense, but it was a very bad wagon defense. That's Captain Moriarty in the picture there. They built a lager, as you can see in this map, and it's a V-shaped lager, but they didn't run the wagon beds close together. They actually just put the distal booms, which are the things the oxen are attached to in front of the wagon, they just put those on the back of the wagon in front of it. So that there was just a boom, basically a long wooden bar in between each wagon. And in addition to that, the river fell while they were doing all this. And as a result, the ends of the wagon lager weren't actually on the river anymore. There was a big gap. There were also a couple of wagons on the other side, which meant they had to split the single company of infantry that they had. Most of the guys were with Moriarty on the North Bank, whereas about 30 guys were with Lieutenant Harwood and also our Sergeant Anthony Booth on the other bank. Now, another senior British officer came out, looked at this wagon lager, said it was crap, and that it wouldn't serve its purpose and would be useless if a large body of Zulus attacked, which indeed it proved to be. And again, Moriarty and the people actually on the spot did nothing about it. Moriarty and Lieutenant Harwood, who I don't know how Moriarty was quite brave in the end, but Harwood certainly wasn't. He was the only other officer there, I believe. So they didn't do anything about this. About 3 o'clock in the morning, a sentry, I think it was about 3:15 in the morning, I beg your pardon, a sentry 40 saw some Zulus in the dark and fired a shot. Moriarty, Captain Moriarty, got up, decided it was nothing to worry about, and went straight back to bed again. Moriarty's tent, by the way, was right at the apex of the triangle, which is kind of top left middle left on the map. In the dawn, which was very misty, as it often is at that time of year when there's a lot of rain and it's warm, a sentry on the bank with only 2 wagons, the lower bank on the map, actually saw a big mass of Zulus advancing towards the wagon laager and fired a shot immediately and raised the alarm. 1 or 2 sentries on wagon laager side also did the same. But you have to understand the guys in the laager were either in tents or were sleeping underneath the wagons. It depended, and they were basically just waking up. The Zulus fired a big volley from all their firearms, and the Zulus had a lot more firearms in 1879, even before the Battle of Isandlwana. They had a lot more firearms than many people realized. Estimates are that there were something like 20,000 guns in Zululand in 1879. So the Zulus fired a big volley at the British, dropped their guns and just charged in with their assegais and shields. And there was no real defense of the wagon laager. The Zulus got inside almost immediately, and it was basically every guy fighting for himself. There was no chance of organizing a proper organized defense. And it's quite interesting. Estimates of the Zulu force vary, but most people say between 800 and 1,000. But it's interesting if you compare this battle with Rorke's Drift. Now, Rorke's Drift, the British garrison was of similar size, but of course they had a little bit of warning and built proper defenses. And they were able to hold off a Zulu force, which was probably 4 times the size of this, for about 14 hours. But because there were no real defenses here, as I say, there were basically great big gaps between each wagon. The Zulus were able to rush inside and simply start assegaiing people left, right, and center. The British soldiers put up what fight they could with their Martini Henry rifles and their bayonets, but there were only probably 70 or so guys on the other bank of the river, and so against 800 to 1,000 Zulus, they're outnumbered like 10 to 1 more. The illustration that Aaron's put up here is a contemporary illustration of the battle. And it's been colored, and this shows guys trying to get to the river and what have you. About 12 men managed to get across the river to the bank where the other 2 wagons were, the side with Harwood, Lieutenant Harwood, and Sergeant Booth. Now, Sergeant Booth had immediately formed the guys up. And they were doing their best to give what covering fire they could across the river to the other guys, and also trying to cover the guys trying to swim across. But bear in mind, the river was flooded. It had a speed of about 7 or 8 kilometers an hour. So, you had to be a pretty good swimmer to get across it, in all honesty. As I say, about 12 guys did, something like that. Hundreds of these Zulu warriors then decided that they were going to cross the river and attack Lieutenant Harwood's party. and many of them did cross. There was another drift a bit further up the river. They were able to get across there, and also the Zulus had a technique where they would all join together, link arms in a column, and just push their way across the river, and it worked quite well with enough guys. You might lose one or two, but the Zulus were not desperately worried about losing one or two warriors. So yeah. You're in this situation where there's about 30 guys with another 12 who've just got across the river, presumably soaked and very likely without their rifles, and some of them would have been injured. And there are hundreds of Zulu warriors crossing the river to try and get Harwood and Booth and their men. Aaron, anything you wanted to add so far?
Yeah, I just had a bit about Moriarty, that he had been in the army for just under 22 years, but this was really the first time he'd seen action. He'd been posted, he'd done various sort of staff postings, I believe, before the mid-1870s, and so part of the reason why he reacts the way he does is more likely the fact that this is the first time he's properly been in the field. But at the same time, we should say, as you mentioned, Duke, he's extremely brave at the end, and he does go down fighting.
Yeah, no, it's worth pointing out that he when he got up from his tent, he shot the first 3 Zulus that came across him, but then was stabbed in his front and then his back, and apparently he shouted out something like, "Fire away, boys, I'm done." That's what people heard anyway. But so yeah, Aaron's completely right. Moriarty was quite brave in the end, in contrast to Lieutenant Harwood, as we will come to in a moment. So Lieutenant Harwood, as the Harwood tells the guys to start falling back, which of course is the only thing they can do. They can't stand 30 guys can't stand in the open against 800 Zulus to 1,000 Zulus. They just can't. So they start falling back, but Harwood finds a horse, gets on board, and shouting out, "I'm going for help," runs away, which was absolutely appalling behaviour by a British officer. I was talking about this on my Discord earlier yesterday, really. And in the 19th century, a large number of British soldiers could ride, and not just farm boys. Every town and city was full of horses. And the thing that Harwood should have done, of course, is to have put someone else on that horse and sent them for help while he stayed with his men. But anyway, we'll come to what happens to Harwood a bit later. So anyway, there is poor old Sergeant Anthony Booth. His officers pissed off and left him. That picture there, which was the thumbnail, is Anthony Booth rallying some of his men. He formed a kind of rallying square with these guys and was like retiring for a bit, but every now and again they would stop and they'd fire a volley at the closest Zulus, which would keep them at a distance. But he had to do this for over 2 kilometers, so quite a long way. And of course, he had injured and wounded men with him, as you can see even from that illustration. And a few guys decided they weren't going to stick with Booth and his party and went off on their own. And all of them were immediately killed by the Zulus. There were even towards the end of his retreat, there were 4 guys who thought they'd take a shortcut to get to the road to Lüneburg, to get to the road to Lüneburg, and those guys were cut off and immediately killed by the Zulus. It was only Booth who managed to keep his men together, and had Booth not kept the discipline of his little group, if they'd have split up, the Zulus would have killed all of them without any doubt whatsoever, because they were so heavily outnumbered. Eventually, after something over 2 kilometers, so a mile or so, Booth and his men came to a farmhouse, and they were able to go into this farmhouse and basically turn it into a blockhouse. And the Zulus decided they weren't going to try and attack this, very sensibly, probably. When the officer, Lieutenant Harwood, got to Lüneburg, the commanding officer there mounted every bloke he had a horse for, and also got another 150 infantry to follow on foot. And these guys eventually came to the farmhouse where Booth and his men were holed up and rescued them, relieved them. Also, one British soldier survived who was taken downstream by the flooding river and eventually made his way back to the camp. But fortunately for him, the Zulus had already looted it and disappeared. The Zulus looted everything, 90,000 rounds of ammunition, loads of food, biscuits, supplies, as I say, rocket troughs, and a lot of gunpowder and what have you. And all of this was looted by the Zulus, and what they couldn't carry away, they burnt. All of these supplies were lost to the British. Sergeant Booth, as he then was promoted to Colour Sergeant because of his leadership skills, and he also got a well-deserved Victoria Cross. Lieutenant Harwood. Oh, there you go. Sorry, that's Booth. After he comes back to England and he's been promoted to Colour Sergeant, and he's wearing his Victoria Cross. There's also a photograph a bit later on, which is Booth in later life when he was a bit older. Let me have a look. Where is it? There you go. That's Colour Sergeant Booth in later life. That one we don't need at the moment. And that's a nice colorized picture of Colour Sergeant Booth. As I say, that was taken when he got back to England. And he got a well-deserved Victoria Cross. Now, Lieutenant Harwood was court-martialed when he got back to England. But somehow or another, they found him not guilty. He was charged with desertion in the face of the enemy. But somehow or other, the court found him not guilty. They said there were extenuating circumstances, like he did actually get help. Big deal, you know. But General Sir Garnet Wolseley was so upset about this that he added some very nasty remarks to the court's judgment and had them read out at the head of every regiment in the British Army. And as a result of this, Lieutenant Harwood resigned his commission in 1880 and left the British Army. So he didn't last very long after his pathetic running away. Garnet Wolseley said something like, the more desperate the situation the British soldier finds himself in, the more he should be able to look to his officers not to desert him, which entirely was true, of course. So, yeah. Anything you want to add, Aaron?
Yeah, I will also you previously mentioned contrasting Intombi with Rorke's Drift. I think you can also do the contrast there between the officers, where you had Rorke's Drift, Bromhead and Chard, both competent officers who understood the situation they were in, and they were willing to take advice, so they can advice from James Dalton. Whereas in Intombi Drift, you've got one officer in Moriarty, who a brave man, but somewhat complacent, and then Harwood is a coward. I can quite imagine if Chard or Bromhead had been in Moriarty's position and they'd heard what Booth said, they would have acted. And so that, I think, this shows the importance of leadership at both levels, both the NCO and the commissioned officer level for this battle.
Very much so. Yep. No, very much so. Anthony Booth, his VC was well deserved, and you have to remember there were really only two medals that British soldiers could be given in 1879. There was the Distinguished Conduct Medal and the Victoria Cross. There wasn't anything else. I mean, these days there are all sorts of graduated gallantry awards and what have you. but they didn't yet have those in 1879. There were only a couple of medals they could give people, and I think Booth's VC was actually very well deserved.
Yeah.
If it hadn't have been for him, probably all of the men would have been killed, because he was the guy who kept them together. And it was only by staying together and repeatedly halting to fire at the Zulu that they were able to keep them at a distance. If the guys had have all split up, they would have all been killed. As indeed several people who broke away from his group were. There were a couple of African foreleapers who used to walk along at the head of the oxen who managed to escape. I'm not sure if any of the wagon drivers did. The British lost about 80 dead in Intombi altogether. That's including the wagon drivers and the African foreleapers. And probably the Zulus lost 30 or 40. We don't really know, to be honest. In later life, after he'd left the army, Booth was actually interviewed by his local newspaper, which Aaron tells me is still going.
Yes, it's now called the Stourbridge News. It's and in fact, though the house he was living in at the time has been pulled down, I believe sorry, I'm saying I think the house that he lived in Briley Hill may still exist as well.
Well, that would be cool. We have got a picture of Booth's grave. He wasn't that old when he died, was he, Aaron?
No, he was only, I think he was only 53.
Yeah, 50s. But that's his grave today, which is in quite good condition, as you can see, which is good to see. And if you're ever in that part of the Midlands, you should go and check him out. As I say, not a particularly well-known Zulu War battle, and it's not as famous as the Rorke's Drift Victoria Crosses and what have you. There was actually, while we're here, there was another guy from the 80th Regiment who also won the Victoria Cross in the Anglo-Zulu War. He was one of the 80th Regiment's mounted infantry guys, and he got his Victoria Cross for his honor, which he survived. He got the Victoria Cross because he rescued a guy who was drowning in the river under Zulu fire. He went back into the river and got him out. So Samuel Wassell, that was Private Samuel Wassell. And so there were two 80th Regiment guys who won the Victoria Cross in the Anglo-Zulu War.
Yeah, I should just add that his grave is in St Michael's Church in Briley Hill, which is just up the road from me. And that grave is kept in a good condition. A few years ago, I think it's been, due to COVID and the lockdowns, it's been left unattended. And so in 2022, somebody went up and cleaned it up. So that's the present state it's in, is because somebody's gone up there, and I think they keep it. They regularly go up and make sure it's well maintained.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just mention, I see people in the chat talking about Lady of Shalott and what have you, and asking cause of death and what have you. Honestly, mate, I'm not going to make any of that stuff public. It's if her family wants to do that, they can. I'm not going to do it. So anyway, but she had been ill for quite a long time. I will say that. So yeah, Aaron, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I will just add that I've got a slight family connection to Booth, because the regiment, the 80th, became the South Staffordshire Regiment, which my great-grandfather served in from 1895 to 1922. And he may have actually crossed paths with Booth, because Booth was still a drill sergeant in the regiment at that point. So, quite possible.
Yeah, very cool.
And yes, we should also mention, Duke, on YouTube there is a documentary. It's about 23 minutes long about Booth, and it is well worth a watch.
Yes.
It is filmed at the place called the Backcountry Living Museum, which, if you're in the Dudley area, I very much recommend people go, because it's an interesting place.
Yeah, I think it's introduced by Kenneth Griffiths, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I met Kenneth Griffiths in South Africa when he was filming Shaka Zulu. But I also met the guy who was playing Shaka Zulu, who was actually a black South African football player who used to called Henry Mayali, and he used to be known as Henry Black Cat Mayali, so because he was a goalkeeper. But anyway, yeah. But he played Shaka Zulu pretty well, I'll say that. Yeah. He was also in another film you'll know, Aaron, The Lion and the Darkness, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
He's also in that, which of course was also filmed in South Africa. So, yeah.
One thing we'll add about Griffiths is that he did also make I think it's a 4-part documentary series about the Boer War that came out in about 1999, which I remember watching when it came out. It was interesting. I think it might be somewhere on YouTube, possibly.
Yeah, and also you can find his Black as Hell and Thick as Grass, which is his documentary. That's on YouTube. There's lots of Zulu War stuff on YouTube if you look for it. But yeah, I can't think of what else we really need to say about this, Aaron, unless you've got anything you want to add.
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. One thing I would just add is it's a great pity there isn't a biography of Booth, even if it's a short one, because I'm surprised the local historian hasn't done that, frankly.
Yeah, we were saying this before we went live, people. There's no separate publication about the Battle of Intombi Drift and Anthony Booth, Victoria Cross. And if someone wanted to write a short book about the Anglo-Zulu War, I would think that would probably be quite a good topic for it.
Yeah.
But as I say, nowhere near as well known as all the Rorke's Drift VCs and all the rest of it, but a well-deserved Victoria Cross. As I say, this battle took place on the 12th of March, and the British were going to have yet another defeat against the Zulus on the 28th of March at the Battle of Schliemann, which is a big tabletop mountain. And it really is a big tabletop mountain. I used to walk across the top of it with my tour groups, and that took you all day by the time you got down the other end. And the Brits sent their irregular cavalry to attack the Zulus who were living on top of it. Unfortunately for them, the main Zulu MP of about 25,000 warriors turned up while they were right on top of this mountain. And yes, didn't go well, as you would expect. And that was the third and final British defeat in the Anglo-Zulu War, and that was only a couple of weeks after this. This is what surprises me a little bit about this battle. I get the men were tired. I get that it was raining all the time and muddy, and but I would have wanted those wagons put very closely together myself, and especially after they were told to do so by a senior officer, and still didn't do anything about it. You can't blame the soldiers, of course, or even NCOs like Booth, but you can certainly blame the officers. And after, Isam Luana had already happened. The Brits had a good idea about how nasty the Zulus could be. So, yeah. But, so I thought we'd do a reasonably short topic this week. Not quite sure what we're doing next week at the moment. We might be doing the Black Prince, but that depends on Mitch, because Mitch is doing most of the research for it. So we might be doing the Black Prince next week. I like to mix up these history streams. You will have noticed that last week we did King Charles I with Apostolic Majesty as a special guest, and we do kings and princes, but we also do people of more humble ancestry like Col.Sgt. Anthony Booth VC. So I think, let me just check if anyone sent us any super chats on Entropy. Yes, somebody did. Thank you very much to Rudd3Trees for sending $5 US. And he just says some support, gents. Thank you very much, Rudd3Trees. That will go straight back into the channel. Basically, the few donations that we get, I just use to pay for StreamYards and for X, for Twitter, so that we can stream live to X at the same time as we stream live to YouTube. So that will go straight back into the channel. Thank you very much, Rudd3Trees. Most kind of you. What caused Booth's death? I think he just died of old age, didn't he, Aaron?
Yeah, I think it might have been something to do with it, possibly with his chest, but I don't know for sure. I can't quite remember. But
let me see if I can find that.
Yeah.
1 second, chaps. Well, I can tell you he died in 1899 in December. He was 53 when he died. And let's see, what else do we have here? And that's all. No, I can't find any other information out. I can tell people that if you want to see his Victoria Cross, it's on display at the Staffordshire Regiment Museum in Whittington, Staffordshire. So if you want to see the actual Victoria Cross he earned, that's where that is. Okay, Aaron, unless you've got anything else you want to add.
No, I can't think of anything else, to be honest.
Anything you'd like to plug, Aaron, while we're here?
Oh yeah, my channel is Aaron James Hook. I do book reviews, but I also do film reviews as well. I've got a live stream coming up this Sunday, which is when myself and 2 indie published authors, John Davies and Steve Stark, discuss our top 3 film adaptations. So that's adaptations into film of anything that was originally a play, book, radio play, or TV show. And I'm also running this month for the first time a book club called the Imperial Pulp Fiction Book Club, and the book we're going to be talking about at the end of the month on the 28th in the live stream is The Forbidden Territory by Dennis Wheatley.
I will. I'll put a link to Aaron Hook's channel in a pinned comment under the video in a bit. Okay, I am going to play us a tune, if it works. There we go. What's that one? It doesn't stop. Okay, it wants to play Silly Buggers. If you want to look that tune up, guys, it's called Sons of the Brave, and it's from Patriotic Archive, which is an excellent channel. do go and check him out. Mitch in the chat says, "Are we doing the Black Prince next Wednesday?" Mitch, we're doing the Black Prince next Wednesday if you want to do it. It's really up to you. If that's when you want to do it, that's when we'll do it. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the stream. Thanks very much to my guest, Darren Hook, and to everyone in the chat. We will see you on Saturday for our normal current events and politics Splendid Isolation stream, which is the same time as this stream, but on Saturday UK time or very early Sunday morning for me. All right, guys, go well, and in the meantime, don't let the bastards grind you down.